Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of The Matt Cave. Thank you all so much for spelunking on by. This week, it's a bunch of odds and ends. There's a little update as far as college football is concerned. ESPN, yes, I know, ESPN, but still, they do still have some good reporters there. Have released a couple of rankings, the top non-quarterback impact players, as well as the top newcomers. And BYU and Utah, well, BYU made both lists. Utah made one. And then an update on the Utah Royals. Yes, the Utah Royals. They may have not played this past week due to an international break for the NWSL. But a little update there, as well as one of their players represents the mighty U.S. women's national team in soccer, who did fall in Brazil 2-1, but it was in Brazil. And it was a very hostile crowd. So it's definitely a game that they needed, especially going into next year's World Cup for them, because that's where the World Cup's going to be for the women. It's going to be in Brazil. So it's a very big deal that they went down there for a friendly, and they saw what it's going to, a little taste of what it's going to be like. It's going to be louder when the World Cup starts, but little taste there. And then some video game news. And when I say some, I mean a lot. It's June. That used to mean E3. Now it means Summer Game Fest, as well as Sony's State of Play. And later this week, Nintendo is going to do their Nintendo Direct. Obviously, that's not going to happen before I record this episode, so that's happening this week as well. So a lot of news floating around, and thank goodness for that. But thank you all so much for being here. As always, please, like, comment, subscribe, whatever it is, however you listen, helps me out a ton. Share this with one person that you think would enjoy the program, and just continue being the awesome people that you are every day. And you can find me on Facebook and Instagram, The Matt Cave Podcast. You can find me on YouTube, The Matt Cave Podcast, as well as wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'm there. All right, so let's start. Let's start with the Utah Royals. They are number one still in ESPN's power rankings. Yeah. They are unbeaten in 10 straight games. They have had a few draws in there, but still unbeaten. And in fact, they almost beat Portland if it weren't for Mandy McGlynn, the goalkeeper, being called for an 8-second violation, meaning you were holding the ball with your hands for 8 seconds. Yeah, and then the Thorns were awarded a corner off of that, and then Utah gave up a penalty in the box, and then Portland scored the penalty, and it was a draw at the end. So Utah led for basically the entire game against a Portland team that is normally a top 4 team in the NWSL, and they have Sophia Wilson, formerly Smith, one of the Tres Leches from the Paris Olympics, who is an incredibly talented striker. Just look at her goal against Brazil this past weekend. So, yeah, really good stuff from the Utah Reign. And Mandy McGlynn, the aforementioned goalkeeper, started for the U.S. women's national team in their game against Brazil and looked really solid. She looked really solid. It wasn't a shutout, but it was a good appearance for a position that is historically been stellar for the U.S. So hopefully Mandy McGlynn gets to be the starting goalkeeper for the U.S. women's national team for as long as she can and represent the Utah Royals there. Because this is awesome. I mean, if you're not paying attention, there are two sports where, and I don't want this to sound like sexist or misogynist, but where there is no fall off in competition or athleticism between the men and the women. And those two sports where you see it the most are soccer and hockey. Now, the WNBA is a better product than the NBA is right now because there's rivalries. Some players just genuinely do not like each other, and that makes the game that much better. The NBA, everybody's a buddy. Everybody's a friend, and it started with LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony, Kevin Durant, all of those guys. Everybody is a buddy of somebody, and they want to keep it that way, which means the rivalries of the early 2000s, the 90s, 80s, and 70s, and 60s just disappeared, and that kind of stinks. So the WNBA is a better product right now, historically not so much, but if you want to watch professional hockey, professional soccer, and there's just no games in the NHL you want to watch, or no games from like a European league because they're off for the summer, watch the women's leagues. They are stellar. Rugby is that way as well. In fact, I enjoy watching women's rugby more than I watch men's rugby. That's not saying much because I don't really watch either. But, Anywho, so shout out to Mandy McGlynn for starting for the U.S. women's national team. Unfortunately, they couldn't get the win against Brazil. And then huge shout out to the Utah Royals, continuing just this unprecedented streak that came out of nowhere. If you look at the power rankings and the predictions for this season for the NWSL, that has a total of 16 teams right now, Utah Royals were 15th or 16th across the board. Expecting nothing from them. Last year was a horrid season for them. But this year, it's much different, and they're rolling. It's really nice. Their next game isn't until July 5th. Due to the World Cup being in the U.S. and international break for the women as they all get geared up for qualifying for the World Cup and stuff like that. So there is that going on as well. So if you want soccer, it's going to be international friendlies for the women, and it's going to be, obviously, the big one, the World Cup here in the U.S. that begins this coming Friday. I know I'm not doing like a preview for the World Cup. That's because, unfortunately, Diego Luna did not make the team, and so there's no locals that are going to be in the big tournament, and there's going to be no games here in Utah. The stadium out in Sandy, the Riot, is just not big enough for it. If you look at the stadiums that are hosting games in the United States, they are football stadiums, American football stadiums that hold a ton of people. So that's really the beginning and the end of it. Let me just say this. How far do I think the U.S. men's national team is going to go? Honestly, I don't really see them getting out of the first knockout round. I don't. There's always something that goes wrong with this crop of players, and they just don't have the backbone. They don't have the fight back of the previous generations of the U.S. men's national team, of the Alexi Lawless years or of the Landon Donovan and Clint Dempsey years, where if they got knocked down, they were knocking somebody else down. Now, that game against Germany, it was very chippy. And they were fighting back. Germany was knocking them around a little bit. The U.S. knocked Germany around a little bit. Germany didn't like it. And so that shows me a little bit of something. That shows me a little fire that they haven't had in a while. So that is something that is creeping up, but I wish it was there. In games that are more... In games where it's not just Mexico, where they show that fire. Because the games against Mexico are fun. It's a rivalry. It's a genuine rivalry. They don't like each other. And they play like it. And that's why that game is so much fun. But they don't really play like that against anybody else, not even Canada. So if they could just get that fire, I think they could get pretty far in the World Cup. Obviously, there's always the home field bump, but it's different in the United States. There's not really that home field advantage because a lot of the fans here hail like their ancestors come from different countries. That's what makes America, America. And I have no problem with them rooting for the other team. In fact, I would love it if they rooted for the other team and the U.S. Like, anytime a goal goes in, they get loud. You know what I mean? That's what I want to see at the World Cup. A team scores a goal against the U.S., get loud. The U.S. scores a goal against your parents' team, you get loud. I think that would be fun. That's what I want to see. But as far as the U.S., maybe the round of 16 is as far as they'll go. Same thing with Mexico, and then Canada, probably the first knockout stage. But I don't see the hosts going very far this year, which is unfortunate because the U.S. really could have had something. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. They looked really solid against Germany. They looked good in their game against Senegal, Senegal is a team that has a lot of top-end talent that plays in the biggest leagues for the biggest clubs, and the U.S. beat them. So I don't know. It'll be an interesting tournament for sure, and I am going to be watching it, but that's about as much of a preview as I'm going to do. I did about 3 minutes there. I think I did pretty good. So now let's talk about the college football stuff, and let's go to college football's top newcomers. So Utah and BYU both are mentioned in this article, but not until pretty far towards the bottom. So at number 72 of the 100 that ESPN did, you have Kelvin Obot, the offensive tackle for Utah. They're saying he's going to be a big-time starter for the Utes. He was the number 42 player in the 2026 recruiting class, which is a pretty big deal for the Utes and BYU. I mean, for the state of Utah, that's a big deal. And he's going to slot right in. Whether it's going to be right tackle or left tackle will be interesting to see what Jordan Gross puts him at. but there's no depth and there's no incumbent starter, obviously, because the 2 starters went to the NFL. So the offensive line is a question mark for the Utes for the first time in a few years. And getting Kelvin Obot is a huge deal. And so he's going to start right away. It'll just depend on what side of the line they're going to be comfortable putting him on. And it is going to be a very run-heavy offense. It has to be, right? With the backfield that Utah has, the quarterback Utah has, I imagine a lot of run, a lot of spread option, and that'll make it easier for the offensive line to get into the season. That's my anticipation there. And then further down the list, we go for BYU's first and only mention in this one. At number 83, it's Cade Uluave. And I think a lot of people are underestimating the kind of impact that Uluave is going to have on BYU. He is a more talented, he's got more athleticism than Jack Kelly. And he's that same kind of player, only he's all over the field. If you look at any of the highlights, any of the film from California the past couple of years, the Golden Bears defense started and ended with Uluave. So Cade Uluave is going to make a huge impact. Health, obviously is going to be a big deal for every player, but he's going to make a big impact. He's going to free up Siale Ezra and Isaiah Glasker to fly around the field because you can trust Cade Uluave in the middle of this defense, which is something that when Jack Kelly got injured last year, Isaiah Glasker wasn't as free to run around, and Isaiah Glasker was playing injured too. So if Isaiah Glasker and Cade Uluave can be healthy for the entire season, BYU's defense is going to be just fine because the secondary remains solid and intact from last season. They're only going to get better. I expect a big year from Raider Demooney. The pass rush is still going to be an issue for BYU. The defensive line does not strike fear in the hearts of many people. Obviously, Keanu Tanavasa is back. That is a big deal. So we'll see. But the defense is going to be really solid again. This isn't my preview. This is just me letting you know about Cade Uluave and my expectations for him. Now, we flip over to the top playmakers that are not quarterbacks coming into this season. So that can be any position not named quarterback in this list. They're not necessarily ranked. There's no number attached to these guys. It's just a list of players to look out for. There is a former Ute on this list. It's John Henry Daly going to Michigan. I'm very interested to see how he performs in the Big Ten against those offensive lines. Because in the Big 12, a lot of the offenses are pass first and they're wide open. So it is a little bit easier because you get one-on-one attention with that offensive tackle. Whereas in the Big Ten, it's more ground and pound. It's bigger guys. So I'm very interested to see how Daly does. But I'm not talking about him. The one mentioned is BYU's LJ Martin. He is on the short list for the Doak Walker Award this coming season. If he stays healthy, yes, he will probably win the Doak Walker unless another running back in the country explodes. LJ Martin's has gotten better and bigger every year since his freshman season. And I feel like this season is going to be a culmination of all of the work he put together and just be an all-time running back season for BYU, something we haven't seen at BYU since the days of Luke Staley, Harvey Unga's senior year, Jamal Williams. That's the kind of season I'm expecting from LJ Martin. He's going to be a problem. He's only gotten bigger, and Aaron Roderick is only going to be increasing his role in the offense like we saw later in the year because he did get injured with his shoulder against Iowa State, and so he wasn't as much of a bruising running back as he would have liked to be. And so they got him the ball out in space a little bit more. Screen passes, swing passes, out of the backfield. They still got the ball in his hands, just not how we were used to seeing, and it was very effective. And he's going to be the focal point of the offense. He just is, again. Like he was last year, he will be again this year. But there's going to be more onus on Bear Bachmeier to get the ball to JoJo Phillips and the tight end room. So I'm very excited for this season for Utah and BYU, if you couldn't tell. I'm not going to do my preview until we get really close to the season, but I just found these two articles in particular very interesting, and they seemed to be pretty darn well researched by the guys who wrote them. So Adam Rittenberg did the top non-QB playmakers, and for the top 100 newcomers, that was Billy Tucker. It seems like those guys did their due diligence before they wrote it, and they didn't just go off of like the overall ratings on college football. You know what I mean? In the video game. They actually did some due diligence. They did some research how they would, like the newcomers, how they would impact their new teams. And then obviously with LJ Martin, you just kind of look at how he's improved every season since he's been in Provo. So awesome stuff there. Congrats to Mandy McGlynn for representing the U.S. and for the Utah Royals being, the best team in the NWSL. Nobody saw that coming. And a couple of big shout-outs for college football there. As far as like the Utah Mammoth, the Utah Jazz go, it's all speculation. It's all rumors. It's all hearsay at this point. There's no solid reporting out there for either team as to what the offseason is going to entail. For the Jazz, it begins and ends with Walker Kessler. I thought the deal was going to get done. Seems like it's not the case. They're still going back and forth on the dollars and cents. It seems like they're in concert about how many years. They just need to hammer out the money. I still think Utah is going to be where Walker Kessler lands, and then that second overall draft pick. That's really the offseason for Utah. I don't think they're going to be players in the trade market. Obviously, they've never been players in free agency. They won't be again this year, so we'll see. But Darren Peterson's getting a lot of talk to be the number 1 overall pick, which would be a boon to BYU, or not to be, well, to BYU as well, but to the Jazz to get AJ DeBonsa. But we'll see what happens as we get closer and closer to the draft. It's 3 weeks away. It's there. And then for the NHL, big names have been popping up as wanting trades. Most notably, Dylan Larkin of the Detroit Red Wings. Just recently, it got leaked that he requested a trade. I don't think him or his camp or Detroit Red Wings front office wanted that to get leaked to the public. I'm sure each party wanted it to be private, because Dylan Larkin has been a champion for the Red Wings. He's done a lot of local work in Detroit for hockey. He's been a good representative for the team, and he just wants out. He wants to win, and he doesn't see a future of winning in Detroit, which is fair. His entire career, he hasn't made the playoffs. He wants to make the playoffs, and so he wants to go somewhere where he can. So on the Utah Mammoth Daily channel, YouTube channel, it's a podcast now as well, you can see my trade idea for him, where he would fit on the roster. I don't want to do that here because it's nothing is set in stone and it's not real reporting. It's just mocking. So I'm not doing that here, but you can go and hear my thoughts on it over there. And other names like Robert Thomas, it's a will they, won't they sort of thing. Yes, he's on the market. No, he's not on the market. That keeps going back and forth. That's one of the 2 players I want Utah to aggressively go after this offseason. The other being Austin Matthews. But that one, again, is much like Robert Thomas, where yes, Austin Matthews is unhappy, but he wants to wait and see what they're doing. Does he like the hiring of the front office? What's going on there? It's all just, it's like a celebrity gossip column. And that's really where we're at for those 2 teams. So that's why I'm not reporting on them. And then obviously MLS is on break for the World Cup. So not much going on for Real Salt Lake either. And I'm not really going to talk about the Salt Lake Bees, because if Utah gets an MLB team, the Bees are going to be gone. Just like the Grizzlies were gone when Utah got a hockey team. It'll be sad, yes, but the market cannot sustain both. So there we go. So that's the sports talk today, everybody. If that is all you were interested in, I understand. But I'm moving on to video games now, where it is announcement season. It's update season for new games coming out later this year and into early next year. And here we go. So things got kicked off by the Sony State of Play is what they call it. And a few games were announced and updated upon. There was the new God of War, where it follows Kratos' wife, which is a very interesting direction to take the series. I'm not interested. It's a big game franchise. It's a game that people have a ton of fun with. And if you enjoy the game, please enjoy it. Don't let my opinion sour you. It's just not for me. It's not the kind of game I enjoy. And the story, a guy who was wronged by the gods of Olympus and now the Norse gods. And it seems like in this new one, it's the Aztecian gods, maybe, is the direction they're going now. It's just, kind of cool, but also not. And then, the everything else that goes along with God of War, nudity, and all that other stuff, just not for me. It's not for me. So that one got announced. It was very polarizing, actually, among the community. We didn't really want this one. We wanted to keep following Kratos and his son. We don't want to follow his wife. all that other stuff. It looked like the gameplay was smooth. It looked like, God of War. So that one's probably going to be good. The God of War games are usually well received, and that was announced. Another one that really caught my eye was Wolverine. And the reason it caught my eye is what the developers said after the trailer was out and after the state of play ended. They said, Wolverine's not going to be an open world game. It's going to be linear. And that's bold because in today's gaming, like going back 5, 6 years, 7, 8 years, when did Skyrim come out? 10 years? It's all about open world. It's all about, you see that mountain over there, you can go to it. I like the idea of keeping a game linear, especially when it's a character like Wolverine. Wolverine does not have the city that he's attached to, like a Spider-Man or a Batman. He's not attached to a city. So if there's a story for Wolverine, it's going to have to follow a linear path. And I'm okay with it. I really am. That actually upped my interest in getting the game, as opposed to running around in this huge open world that doesn't need to be as big as they made it. It's more walking than actual gameplay. It looks like the Wolverine game is going to be gameplay. So I am interested in it. And they also said you have a gore filter. A lot of people aren't pleased with the fact that there's gore in it. You could turn it off and keep it a comic book experience. And I like that too. I like it when games have the option to turn it off. Borderlands does the same thing. If you could play like you're playing in a comic book, you can turn the gore off. I like that. So that's really what caught my eye when it came to Sony State of Play. Nothing else really moved the needle for me. It was those two announcements that really did something. And then this past Saturday, I think, or was it Friday? It might have been Friday. It was the Summer Game Fest, which is the new E3 from the Game Awards. Jeff Keighley, all of that. And here, there were a lot of announcements, as you would expect at these, I don't know what to call them anymore. It used to be a convention with E3. Now it's just like a show, I guess. And so when we're looking at it, the big one that got a lot of people excited was Resident Evil Veronica. It's a remaster of Resident Evil Code Veronica from, I believe, the PlayStation 2 and Xbox days, maybe Xbox 360, PS3. And a lot of people were excited about that. Not me. As you all know, Resident Evil, not my game. I'm not into horror games. I'm not into horror in general. I don't like the feeling of feeling scared. So, and that's really the long and the short of it. I'm not going to act like a tough guy and be like, oh, that doesn't scare me. I think it's dumb. I could have predicted that. No, I don't like to get scared. That's why I don't like those games. I'm not too afraid to admit that. Cuphead, Mighty Cuphead Adventure is a throwback to, 8 or 16-bit games, and it looks really fun. It's Cuphead, but it's like Shovel Knight-esque, I'll say. And if you don't know Shovel Knight, then more like Mega Man or Mario. If you want to go there, Castlevania even. So that looked interesting. Alien Isolation 2, again, another horror game. Not my style, but people were excited about that. Gen Atlas looked really interesting because it's from the creator of Ico and Shadow of the Colossus, and people love those games. They adore those games. I've never played them, but when I worked at GameStop, those games, you can keep those games on the shelves. So that's really exciting for a lot of people. It's a sci-fi shooter with giant monsters and robots battling each other. It's pretty darn cool. And then Stranger Than Heaven was really funny because it's a game that has Snoop Dogg in it. It's in the vein of Yakuza a little bit. And at the very end, it showed Tupac, which was really funny. The game is going to launch in January. Again, it's not a game for me, but it seemed like a lot of people were excited about it. Mortal Shell 2, which is like a Dark Souls-esque type game. People are excited about that one. For me personally, the only games that really caught my eyes at the Game Awards Summer Game Fest announcement show were Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag Resynced. That looks really fun. A lot of people say that was the end of the good Assassin's Creed games. I push back on that because Odyssey was a lot of fun. It really was. I was a fan of Assassin's Creed Odyssey. But the other one's not so much. So I kind of am on board on that. And then Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles The Last Ronin could be interesting. The publisher, I'll leave it at that. However you feel about the publisher, that's on you. Me personally, I'm probably not going to get it, but I will watch someone play it who did buy it. Gundam Rogue Orbit looks interesting. Another Gundam game. Giant mech games are making a comeback. Armored Core 5 came out recently-ish, a couple years ago now. But that looks pretty good. And then Guild Wars 3. They said something interesting. They're taking the next step in MMOs. And I don't know what step that's going to be. They didn't really show that much. So I am interested. I did play Guild Wars 2 for a little bit, looking for a World of Warcraft alternative. Final Fantasy XIV and Realm Reborn filled that void, but Guild Wars for a little bit was a lot of fun. And so it'll be interesting to see what they do. The game's going to be on PC and PlayStation 5. We'll see. The other one, Star Wars Galactic Racer. This is pod racing. It's back. That looks like it could be a fun jaunt, but not for $70. And then another one that really caught my eye was Star Wars Zero Company. Now, Star Wars Zero Company is going to be a tactics game. So if you've played Final Fantasy Tactics or you've played XCOM, those type of games, that's what this game is going to be like. But again, if it's going to be $70, I'm not all that interested. It doesn't look like a game that's going to have enough in it to justify $70, but it's a Star Wars property, so you know it's going to cost that much. That's really what caught my eye. There's a new Among Us game, Among Us Story On Guard, so they're doing like a story game. And then Monster Hunter has a new expansion coming out. Attack on Titan 3 is going to wrap up the series there. So there is some stuff. Hitman World of Assassination with a new exclusive target being Wiz Khalifa. Pal World 1.0 is officially launching on July 10th. I already have the game. You know I'm going to be playing 1.0. The Wolf Among Us 2 is real. It is Telltale Games, and it will be coming out. They are working on it. And then Stellar Blade was another one that a couple of my buddies were looking forward to, but not me, not my kind of game. And then Final Fantasy VII Revelation. I will be remiss not bringing this one up. I think Final Fantasy VII is overrated. There, I said it. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I think it's overrated. It's not as good as everyone thinks it is. It's just, it was a massive event in gaming. It was a massive story being told, and it was a break of Square from Nintendo. That was a major break. And it was a major thing. And it was on the Sony PlayStation. It was not on the Nintendo 64. And so that's kind of signaled a new fandom. It really announced the PlayStation as being a true competitor to Nintendo on the market. So that also bleeds into it. But Final Fantasy VII Revelation is coming out. It's the final of the trilogy. I guess the story of Final Fantasy VII needed 3 games. I don't know. But there you have it. That one's coming out. Not my cup of tea. And then I only have a couple of minutes to go over Microsoft's Summer Game Fest. The game showcase is what they call it. A lot was announced. They announced about 25 things, 26 things total, 25 games. And of the games that were talked about or shown, I marked, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's a pretty good hit rate for me. So for me, Fable, that's the big one. I've been wanting Fable for a very long time. We have a solid release date, not a window, not a month. It's February 23rd of next year. You know I'm getting that game. Halo Campaign Evolved coming out July 28th on everything, PlayStation, Xbox, PC. Reimagine the first Halo campaign with new missions, new enemies, new weapons. It'll be fun. I'm getting that. Persona 4 Revival. I never played Persona 4. I played Persona 5 and loved it. I also played Metaphor ReFantazio, which is kind of the same style of game, and absolutely adored it. So I'll probably be picking that one up. That comes out February 18th of next year. Join Us looked hilarious. It's a cult game where you start your own cult. You recruit people to fight against and prepare for the end times. It looked hilarious. I'm getting that one. Comes out in March of next year. Crazy Taxi's coming back. Crazy Taxi World Tour coming out next year. No window, no date, but it looks really fun. Really good song that they put on there as well. Then you have the 25th anniversary console, the see-through green plastic that they did for the original Xbox. They're doing again for the Xbox Series X and S. That will be November of this year and be sold out to scalpers, unfortunately. And lastly, Clockwork Revolution coming out in 2027. It's no longer announced that it's being worked on. This game looks fabulously fun, funny. I want you to look into this game, and next week, if there's nothing for me to talk about, I'll dive into these games more deeply. But thank you all so much for being here, and I will see you all next week when we spelunk back into the Mad Cave. Have a good week, everybody.